Welcome to my second video in my series of videos about unusual whales. If you haven't seen the first video, I'll put a card on the screen for you right now. Last time I tested whether there were significant differences between the mean averages of the winning and losing alerts. Today I want to see if we can use those variables to find winning trades and increase our win rate beyond the unusual whales benchmark. First, let's define that benchmark. In my first video, I used data from December 2020 to March 2021, but for this video, I'm going to expand the data set to include May 2021. As with my prior video, I'm going to be showing a variety of win definitions, but I'm going to be focusing on the 25% win definition for the rest of this video. Here's the performance of unusual whales without any filters applied. As you can see, there were a total of 9,765 call alerts and 8,419 put alerts in our time period. For the 25% win definition, the win rate for calls is 59.8% and the win rate for puts is 55.7%. This will be our benchmark to beat as we do a deep dive into our variables. I want to see if any of the variables have certain ranges where the win rate is greater than the benchmark. For each of the 12 variables, I'm going to sort the list by that variable, and then I'm going to group the alerts into deciles. Using puts as an example, we have 8,419 put alerts in the time period. So each decile will have 842 alerts, except for the 10th decile, which will only have 841. Next, I will calculate the win rate of that decile so we can start doing comparisons. Here are the results, and I highly encourage you to open the spreadsheet linked in the description to follow along. As you can see, all 12 variables are split into deciles, with decile 1 being the decile with the smallest values of that variable, and decile 10 being the decile with the largest values of that variable. The next column shows the number of alerts in that decile. Then we get to the min and max columns, which show the smallest and largest value in that decile respectively. The thing to note is that the values are inclusive and there is some overlap between the deciles. This is a bit of a weakness because alerts with identical variable values sometimes get arbitrarily split into different deciles, but I wanted to keep the decile sizes roughly the same. The next columns are the win definitions and the win rates for that definition. Next, we have the average high return for all alerts in that decile. And finally, I have calculated the average amount of days it took for winners in the 25% win definition to reach their high return and the standard deviation of that average. As an example, this is how I would interpret the first row of the results for puts. For the ask variable, decile 1 had 842 alerts. The minimum value of the decile was around 2 cents, and the maximum value was 27 cents. If we set our win definition to 25%, then 55.7% of the alerts in this decile were winners. The average high return of all alerts in this decile was 122.3%. Of the winning alerts that met the 25% win definition, it took an average of around 7.5 days to reach their high, with a standard deviation of around 7 days. Here are some of my general observations. Lower buy amounts have a higher win rate. This is counterintuitive, as higher buy amounts are supposed to mean more conviction in the trade. There are so many whale hunting strategies out there right now that tell you to focus on the highest volumes and the largest buy amount, but that might not be the best course of action. With an exception for the first decile of ask and bid, smaller ask and bid values seem to have a higher win rate. Perhaps this effect is similar to the small cap effect in stocks. Other than buy amount, ask and bid, I wouldn't really feel comfortable applying a larger is better or smaller is better rule to any of the other variables. For most of the others, there seems to be a sweet spot or multiple sweet spots that have a higher win rate. Many of the whale hunting strategies that I see out there rely on a simple larger is better or smaller is better rule for some of their variables. But judging from the data, I think it would pay to adopt a more nuanced approach to developing your strategy. Now that we have the win rate by decile for all of our variables, it's time to develop our strategy. Obviously, this is a personal choice, but I'll just share some ideas using calls as an example. We could go back to the first video where we ranked our variables by significance and develop a strategy around the most reliably significant variable. For calls, it was by amount, which was significant for every single win definition. From the win rate spreadsheet, it looks like decile 1 had the highest win rate of 65.9%. So we can filter our alerts for buy amounts between 13,284 and 29,480. If we're a more active trader, we could expand our filter to decile 2, which had a similar win rate, by increasing the upper bound to 53,650. We could also just choose a variable based on personal preference. For example, I always have tons of anxiety when buying weeklies, so maybe I'll develop a strategy around the expires in variable. I can see that decile 6 has the highest return, so I will filter my alerts for options with between 30 to 39 days to expiration. That way none of my alerts will be for weeklies. So far I have been focused on the 25% win definition, which is my personal preference, but maybe you want to go for 100% return on your trades. To maximize your win rate, it might be better for you to go for decile 3, which is between 8 to 14 days to expiration. We could also develop a strategy based around restrictions on our portfolio. Let's say you have a small portfolio, but you still want to diversify your options trades. We would want to use the ask variable to keep our individual trades small. But in this case, we can see that decile 1, the lowest asked, performed worse than benchmark. It would probably be best if we focused on decile 2, which has the highest win rate, but still keeps our trades between $25 and $43. For me personally, I don't have any strong preferences or restrictions. So I'm just going to sort the deciles from highest to lowest win rate. And I'm going to go with gamma, which is a significant variable. And I'm going to filter for alerts between 0.07 and 0.09 gamma. The expected win rate would be around 66.5%, which is 6.7% higher than the unusual whales benchmark. Similarly for puts, I will sort by highest win rate and choose expires in between 23 and 32 days with a win rate of 65.2%, which is 9.5% higher than benchmark. As you can see, we are well on our way to choosing filters that will beat the unusual whales benchmark. And I sincerely hope that this analysis and the win rate spreadsheet will help you in developing your own strategy. In addition to my win rate spreadsheet shared in the description, I'm also going to make available my consolidated data file. It consolidates all months from December 2020 to May 2021 into one file, and adds columns for volume open interest ratio, expires in, days to high, and adjusted high return. For a full explanation of how I prepare my data, please see the first video in this series. I'm also going to share the same file with winner columns that indicate whether that particular alert met the win definition. The columns are labeled true if it does, and false if it doesn't. This file is split into one for calls and one for puts to make the size a bit more manageable. Finally, I'm going to share a GitHub repository of all the code that I used for this analysis. But before I share it, let me be clear that none of what I did requires any coding whatsoever. The only reason I did the coding was as I was adding more and more months of data, Google Sheets was starting to get slower and slower. If you run into the same challenge, you're welcome to use my code. Everything is done in Damfo.js, which is a JavaScript library that's heavily inspired by the Pandas library. Anyone familiar with the Pandas API will easily be able to use Damfo.js. So far, I have focused on using a single variable, but obviously we're not limited to just one. Up next, I want to analyze whether different combinations of variables can produce even higher win rates, and I'll show you my actual results over the last 2 months. Thank you to all the people who liked or commented on my last video, and thank you to the people who emailed me from my site. This is such a niche topic, and I really wasn't expecting this many people to be interested, but thank you everyone for the support, and I really do hope these videos and these posts are helpful to you in some way.